Today is November 21st, which is a Friday. For those of you who are new here, Bytemaster comes in every week and runs a hangout for us and answers questions from the community in an open town hall type of format. And we usually start out with a project update. We go to community questions, and then we try to save a little bit of time for one or two Reddit questions. All I ask is that people make sure to try not to speak over each other and just respect everybody else. I think we can kind of govern ourselves here. We're all big boys and girls. So with that said, are you ready to start, Bytemaster?
Sure. Let's get the show on the road.
Rock on. Do you have any updates for us this week?
No updates. I decided to take a vacation, and I let the whole team take a break this week so it could be more refreshed for next week.
That sounds good. What did you guys do? Ping pong?
Lots of sleeping, napping, drinking.
Napping and drinking together?
Just kidding.
Oh, you should have kept going, and then I was going to wait for a few minutes and buy some BTS after the sell-off occurred.
It's been a interesting week. We've made lots of progress, fixed lots of bugs, enhanced our testing. We're one step closer to escrow. We have offline multi-sig working, send to address working, and we'll soon hopefully be able to send to a Bitcoin address. So if you're doing business with someone who's got a Bitcoin address, you can just send to their Bitcoin address directly from our wallet. I would expect next week, next Wednesday is probably when 425 will come out, but we have lots of testing to do between now and then on the relative bids and asks to make sure that we didn't break anything. Other positive developments. Rumors have it that we have a working JavaScript implementation with the ability to create and sign and broadcast a transaction entirely from JavaScript.
For the layman, what is the value in this?
Yeah, the value of that is that we have the core piece of JavaScript necessary to create a web wallet that does not depend upon any C++ code.
So it works in any browser. People could use their mobile phones for it to access their account that way?
Yeah, it's basically blockchain.info for BitShares. Now this is just the raw JavaScript, the raw utilities for signing transactions, passing unit tests. There's still a lot of infrastructure work to implement the login system, storing the keys on the server, and supporting all the various transaction types. But the hard part, I would say, is done. And just for clarification, I didn't do that work. That's James. He's been working on that steadily over the past several weeks or month. And I don't know if it's James 212 in this Mumble session, but he's been working on this for a while and made great progress. So I'm excited to see what's going to come of that. So we are working on adding support to allow gateways to exist, kind of like how Ripple has Ripple gateways, and I think Next has their gateways. It will allow you to send Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Peercoin to an address and have IOU Bitcoin sent to you within the blockchain, and you can send the IOU back and it'll send the real Bitcoin back. Those will be on and off ramps that can be entirely automated, will allow BitShares to function as a cryptocurrency exchange without any withdrawal limits, as long as you trust the person issuing the IOUs. The good news is that the person issuing the IOUs does not need to host a website or do any of those types of things. They can exist almost entirely anonymously as long as you are willing to trust an anonymous person for your on and off ramp. But they can also be exchanges, so we can have Bidder and some of the other exchanges issue IOUs on our blockchain. And I think that will really start to change the game. When you can trade Bitter CNY against BTC38 CNY on our blockchain, and those can be immediately deposited into the various exchanges. It allows you to move value between exchanges and allows you to trade directly on the blockchain against BitCNY and all the markets using the exchange's escrow service.
One point of clarification on the JavaScript implementation there. Is it basically that you've achieved being able to, the signing of the transactions was just basically a cryptographic problem where you've got the math worked out where you can do that in JavaScript? Is that the basic issue?
There's the cryptography and then there's the serialization. We've got to get our transaction format serialized in JavaScript. So we've done that.
Are you using JSON objects for that serialization or something else?
The transactions are binary.
Thank you.
So you said something earlier about the possibility to send to a Bitcoin address. And can you explain a little bit deeper how that works?
Well, a Bitcoin address is just a public key. So we can basically send to any address. And you can either use a BitShares address or a Bitcoin address. They're just two different ways of referencing the same public key.
Okay, so I can say I have an account and I can create an additional Bitcoin address which has the Bitcoin address format and send BitShares to this address, but it's still just BitShares and that's just a different type of address.
Yes, it's just a different type of address. This is actually to help with the automation of the gateways. You can send Bitcoin to the gateway's address, and then it can take the Bitcoin address of the sender and send the IOU to that address, which means you don't need any other communication or coordination channels.
With regard to the whole lightweight client and servers that they connect to, do you see a centralization happening over time, or is it too early to tell?
We're making everything open source. In theory, people can compete to win customers, and we can have 1 million clones of BitShares.info.
So early on there might be some centralization, but over time you see competition having more and more of these gateway nodes that you connect to that have the full access to the blockchain that the lightweight clients connect to then.
Yes, there should be open competition there. I think a lot of the delegates will probably end up running these types of services in addition to their delegate nodes. The goal is to make it really easy for anyone to set up a web server and to do it. But they'll probably end up specializing on different types of authentication and security levels. After all, you are storing other people's funds that might be encrypted on your server, but they're still on your server, and you're serving up the JavaScript, and if that's compromised, then your keys can be compromised. So there's probably going to be competition on who can provide that service with the most security. The possibility of a Chrome extension or plugin that can be installed so that you can have greater security over the content of the wallet. So there's lots of opportunities once we have a full JavaScript version and transaction signing working.
Do you think there'll be a lot of issues related to bonding and collateral to support these nodes that are offering this type of service? Bonding
is, in a way, a form of escrow that's open-ended until someone decides to ask for their funds back. So that's probably a ways off, but I can easily see that someone who's doing this will put some of their funds in a bonded thing, buy insurance. That's what a lot of these Bitcoin wallets and companies do. They actually insure their wallets against losses. Who knows what people will end up doing, but the opportunities are endless.
Final Claim is asking about, here's the question. There was a discussion about recurring payments to hit the high-risk merchant markets such as adult. I'm assuming that is pornography or other types of adult material. Has this work begun? If not, will we see it by 1.0?
Recurring payments is a client-side feature. It's not a blockchain feature. I suppose we could do it on a blockchain feature. All right, so let's step back a little bit and talk about high level here. Ease of use is on one side of the spectrum. Privacy and security are on the other side of the spectrum. It's really hard to get all three. From a web wallet perspective, it's a lot easier to have one public key and just use it for everything, and therefore your transaction history is public. And if you do that, then you don't need the messaging system or any other crazy infrastructure to provide your security. If you go to a more secure model, now you need extra infrastructure. So let's talk about our competitors for a second here. Primarily, I'm looking at Ripple. I was looking at what would it take to get a gateway, like Ripple has gateways for dollars, won, who knows. And then I was looking at what Bitstamp has to say about their Ripple integration. With Ripple IOUs on the Ripple network from Bitstamp, they have the ability to freeze individual accounts and to freeze all accounts and stop trading of their IOUs on the network as a whole. Ripple accounts have a single public key. There is no privacy in Ripple, period. So you see the market cap Ripple has today. You see the traction they're gaining. And that's all with zero privacy features whatsoever. I think that there is a lot of niches in this market, and we want to be able to fill as many of them as possible. But I think we can gain a lot of ground, and a lot of users will use our stuff even if their transactions are public. It's easy to use. To that end, we're looking at making sure that for the lightweight wallet, for the web wallets, we just do everything public. You still have encrypted memo contents, but on the blockchain you have one public key that all funds are sent and received from, and you can query the balance and you can see the complete transaction history for that key. That will make it a lot easier for everyone to manage it. You back up that one key and you have control of all your funds. All your market orders use that key. You can then change your active key if you want to change it, but generally speaking, you're not creating a new key for every single transaction you do. And that will make a huge performance gain for lightweight wallets. We can still have the Titan wallet infrastructure, but that's probably for more advanced users that want to make sure that they've got a working mail server or they're running a full node and thus can scan all transactions. The biggest challenge we have with Titan is that no server can scan all accounts. If they get 1,000 users, they won't be able to keep up. They have to start deploying clusters, scanning subsets of their users. Can't sustain one computer per 100 users or something like that. Just not sustainable on a web service. We are really looking at two things. One, adding the features for user-issued assets to both be multi-sig, to allow the issuer to freeze and have complete control over all balances of their asset. You're implicitly trusting the issuer anyway. The issuer can revoke some of these powers if they want to, and it'll be one of those things where you start out with the powers and you can revoke it, but after you revoke it, you can't take the powers back. That will allow companies greater ability to maintain legal compliance while using our system. And it'll also allow people to use the system in ways that are perfectly legal but don't have the same compliance requirements. So really trying to make sure our code works for all users in various use cases and not force everyone to fit in the same class of high security, full node type user.
But you do have a plan, though, to maybe might not be an initial plan with this current market push, but you do plan to support both a full node and the lightweight nodes, so that people can, if they elect to, have the full privacy features that we've been envisioning all along.
Yeah, the full node's not going away.
I recognize, the trade-off between privacy and security and convenience. So I'm just going to be one that will scrutinize those decisions just to make sure that we don't lose that capability. Because my perspective is that if you lose the privacy, then you have opened the door for control.
Yeah, the key is that you can take your privacy if you want it, or you can give up your privacy for convenience. You can take control of your private keys for security, or you can allow someone else to manage your private keys for convenience. You want to be able to support all users, and we shouldn't force all users into the maximum security, maximum privacy mode. because that would just make it too hard to use for many users who don't demand those features and they demand ease of use.
Agreed.
So with respect to recurring payments, if we have a simple account where the user has elected to only have one key and not care so much about their privacy, then we can set up recurring payments in the blockchain for that account. Anytime they receive money, it's going into that account, and thus recurring payments can come out of that account. Nice and easy. The challenge for recurring payments is Titan users. You can't set up a pre-signed statement for all your balances. For Titan users, they'd have to have their client running and perform those payments for them automatically. It couldn't be a published thing. I hope that answers your question.
Well, so you're saying that if you want to have recurring payments, then you kind of have to sacrifice a little bit of privacy by using a one-key source for those payments.
Yes.
I think that'll address most of the people that want recurring payments. It certainly is an important distinction to make for people that might not understand that that's what they're giving up to have recurring payments. But I think it's very clear that's the way we have to go, because that's what most of the users are demanding. So for me personally, I don't think I will be using many other recurring payments systems, but that's just me, and everybody else has to make their own decision.
Metal Allen is asking, well, he says, currently I can use SSHFS to mount local drive and make a BTS wallet at the VPS to load wallet folder on his computer. Is it possible to have the ability to load the wallet folder from a remote place, or on a remote place?
All things are possible. A symbolic link can direct you to wherever you want to go. I don't recommend storing your wallet on a VPS.
Could you tell the average user, why you would not recommend that?
A VPS is a virtual machine. The virtual machine is completely compromised by the host that it's on, which means that your private keys are compromised to the host service provider.
So the person you're paying for the service has access to all of your keys, just like you do.
Effectively.
What about the question vice versa? I let the VPS to access the wallet in my computer.
You want to reverse the process. All right, so these are long-term designs that we've been discussing. Is to create a wallet server and to have the wallet itself talk to the wallet server for all operations. And then you can host the wallet server on a more secure machine than your computer. It could be a Raspberry Pi, or it could be a cloud service, or it could be reversed. The cloud service can access your home computer. Those are all things that can happen. Right now, if you want a cloud service to access your local computer, what you do is run the daemon on your computer, SSH with reverse port mapping, the RPC port of your wallet to that computer, and then you can connect localhost on the cloud computer to your local computer over the secure connection.
So does that mean effectively that somebody could use a VPS to mask where they're coming from to access their wallet, or where their wallet is located, or how does that work?
It does all kinds of things. It allows you to access your money from anywhere. It could theoretically mask where the transaction is broadcast from. It still is a slight compromise because in theory the VPS provider has root access to your machine, and therefore they can connect to your RPC port. And if they know your RPC user and password because they've been sniffing all the socket connections, then they can access your computer and your home wallet. Anyway, there's always security concerns when you have network operations.
So essentially, there's got to be a difference between why somebody would want to go that route as opposed to using like a blockchain.info style web wallet that you guys are coming up with.
So the most secure way to do web or mobile wallets is to have your private keys backed up in many places, a server hosted behind a firewall potentially behind a NAT on your home network, and then have a web service that proxies requests to your inner server with approval and two-factor authentication and all those other things. That keeps you in control of your private keys. You're not uploading your private keys to a server like blockchain.info. You're not relying on your JavaScript not to be swapped out. Right now, if your blockchain.info password is compromised, they can drain your wallet. They can decrypt your private keys. If blockchain.info is compromised and hosts bad JavaScript and you enter your password, then they can once again steal your keys. So there are ways that you can enhance all that with mobile apps that check SSL certificates and do other authentication checks. I mean, these are the type of things that will happen organically as market demand for BitShares grows enough to support that type of ecosystem.
Tony's asking here, can you actually put a pay on the 10th this amount until I cancel it? Essentially, that would be recurring payments, Tony.
We can implement that in the wallet. As long as you leave your wallet open, then you can do that type of thing. You'd have to make sure your balance was in the account that you pre-signed for. And there's several ways you can do the recurring payments. One is to pre-sign a bunch of transactions that aren't valid until a certain date. And then they're only valid if there are funds available in the account on that date, so you can cancel it just by removing funds. The other is to create the transactions on the date. Just make sure that your wallet's open every day. And the other is to use a third-party provider that does it for you.
We're talking a lot about delegates in the community right now, and you've mentioned a couple times that there are some things that are beyond the scope of the community, that the development team that you have currently working on BitShares are it's kind of outside the scope of what they can do right now. Are there any developments that you would like to see made that potentially delegates could use that as a means to get paid to become a 100% paid delegate?
I'd like to see escrow services pop up for direct user-to-user purchases of assets. I'd like to see gateways set up. I'd like to see local Bitcoins style things set up. I have somebody who's working on some web shopping cart infrastructure for bit assets. And I think that's going to be particularly useful. So there's lots of things like that, in addition to, of course, web wallets, block explorers, and simply setting up stores that accept BitUSD. So we have lots of things going on there. As far as the new on and off ramps, they're not all startups. Some of them are already active in trading other cryptocurrencies. I think at the addition of dollars to them is what's new. That's what's taking the regulatory compliance time. It also has to do with just a lot of factors, mostly legal.
What is your legal roadmap like? Is there already no Invictus Innovations incorporated anymore in China and in Virginia?
The company will exist, but it will only have 2 or 3 employees. It'll basically just be me. All the developers will be independent, working for the DAC itself. That transition from Invictus doing everything to the developers being independent is scheduled to happen by the end of the year.
Why is it still necessary that there's Invictus incorporated with you being it?
You don't need it, but we need the company to still exist. We can't just close it down because we've got all the tax issues for the next couple of years that need the company around. It's also going to hold any trademarks, domain names that we've purchased. So it's going to hold some small role, but it's not going to be the vehicle through which things get done. I want development responsibility to rest outside of Invictus. I don't want Invictus to receive all the money and then convert it and then pay people dollars. It's really part of the effort of decentralizing things. It comes down to really practical issues such as the funding Invictus has available to it. What kind of things can we have?
What do you think are going to be the biggest legal or regulatory challenges in the future? Like what comes to my mind would be stuff with the SEC and the AJS funds, and or delegates that would be no problem if they have the same status as minors. Where do you see the biggest challenges or dangers in that respect?
I don't want to comment on legal issues. It's a minefield. I can say that I'm fairly confident that our attorneys and accountants have helped us arrange our affairs so that we are compliant with all laws and regulations.
Makes sense, yeah.
I've got a question about the thread that CoinHoarder started related to voter apathy, and I noticed that Stan participated a little bit, but I didn't see you participate in there, Bytemaster. Could you comment on your perspective of that if you saw it, and if you didn't see it, what's your opinions and your perspective in general about voter apathy and how we can quash that? Because I see that as being very central to the whole viability of DPoS, really.
I think voters will become less apathetic when there's something that matters. As long as things are running smoothly, then only the proactive individuals will vote. And I think that that's actually kind of good. If you have a whole bunch of people voting, you're going to get... Sorry, I'm losing my words here. If you have a whole bunch of people voting, you have too many cooks in the kitchen. And it's going to make it hard to change things quickly. So it's a little bit more agile if you've got fewer people driving things. But how do we plan on resolving it in general is make it easier, have users vote without them even knowing really that they're voting, basically by following their friends and or the recommendation of the developers. I think that it's important for us to have exchange partners take a proactive role in helping to secure our network. These exchanges make a lot of money off of our success. They don't make any money off of our failure. If they can help vote with customer funds in a responsible, transparent manner, it's both good for their exchange and it's good for our system as a whole. So, yes, it is a little bit more centralizing. If you don't like the way a particular exchange is voting, you shouldn't use that exchange. You can still vote with your money just by where you store it. If you want to trust bitshares.info web wallet, it can automatically vote for you unless you choose to take a proactive role, and that will give that party control or a large degree of influence over how people vote. It's still delegated. You're trusting them with your funds. You're trusting them to provide you a service. I think that you're going to end voter apathy by delegation.
So how would you counter the argument that opponents might make at this stage of the game that you're vulnerable to only 13% of a voting state could take over the delegation? I don't see it myself, but I mean it's something that came up in that thread, and I'd just like to see what you would say to counter that argument.
If someone decided they're going to spend about $5 or $6 million to put in all their own delegates and thus implicitly fire all of the development team, the development team would just fork them out and everyone would ignore them. And it'd be a huge donation to the BitShares network. At this early stage in the game, we're nimble and agile enough that such an attack wouldn't stick. And it would probably demonstrate that the control's in the hands of the users more than the protocol. And I've said this many times before. The protocol is a tool. It's a communication tool that allows people to come to a consensus about what the proper state of a ledger is. If a bad guy comes in and manipulates loopholes, whether it's a bug with an integer overflow or it's a brute force on buying up all the stake, if they do either of those things and violate what people consider as fair and just, then change the software to close the loophole and continue. And once you get large enough to the point that buying even 10% is $1 billion, you're far more secure than Bitcoin, even with only 10% at the highest delegate level. I guess that's my point, is that you're not really trusting the software. You're trusting the community and the people to agree on a set of principles of who owns what. And I'll remind you that if they take over all the slots, they start inflating and do nothing, they don't process anyone's transactions, don't allow other people to vote them out, then you basically have a snapshot. They're denying all other transactions. So you just fork from their snapshot. If they continue to allow transactions, then voter apathy will end very quickly because, hey, let's get these guys out of here, and you'll end up raising the bar for them to continue to maintain their position. Keep in mind that voting in a bunch of delegates is an expensive operation, requiring 2 weeks worth of pay. So as long as the community can organize within 2 weeks to vote them out, it's a loss on the attacker.
Sounds good. I like that perspective, that argument, that counter argument. Now, last question related to that is, what is your development plans to make voting a little bit easier for the end user, to improvements in the client to make voting a little bit easier to do?
For starters, we'll allow you to add a publish button where you can publish your slate as a public field in your account. And then you just thumbs up anybody who you trust. So you can thumbs up my account, and anytime I publish it, you'll just start using whatever my new slate is. Or you can use any combination of people out there. There's infrastructure mostly in place for doing that already. It's just been put on the back burner right now. We get to version 1.0.
I'd like to encourage a discussion in the community about what I call delegate campaigning standards, if you like to say it like that. So that would be formal criteria the community the community agrees on, which delegates the campaign for delegate position should fulfill. So it are not content-related or performance-related criteria, but criteria of transparency, especially. For example, I saw yesterday a delegate called BTC 38 delegate or something, and so I did not have any measure to vary or any method to verify if that really is at the exchange, the well-known exchange. So if there was a standard, a formal criteria which said every delegate should put information in the delegate information section in the client about where his campaign thread can be looked up, that would be, for example, a criteria which would make voting more efficient and transparent, make the whole DPoS system more resilient and reliable. So I have made a post, and I'll post a link in a minute, and I'd like to encourage a discussion here and on the forum about that proposal.
Hardly agree with that. That's a very good point, DeLulo. Thank you.
I think all delegates should have a website, and the website should include the real-world identity. I guess real-world identity is not important if you're less than 3% pay. But if you're more than 3% pay, you should probably include your real-world identity. And if you're a delegate with the name like BTC38, you better have something on BTC38's website publicly identifying that. You can't trust a name alone to imply anything. Those would be the standards I would have.
Right. So, and what I mean is that there should be like a standard that makes it more easy for the shareholders to see if that is a good vote or not. Like every delegate should provide the same kind of information. For example, for me, that would be the identity status. If the delegate wants to be anonymous, if the delegate has a public identity, or if the delegate has a forum identity, it should be explicitly specified which of those three categories the delegate falls into. That would be one of my criteria, but I'd like to encourage everyone to contribute or say what his criteria would be, and then maybe we can come up with a set of criteria which the community agrees on, and every delegate then, because there's a major agreement on it, follows.
I think what needs to happen is someone or some delegate that's gone through extensive transparency measures should take it upon themselves to validate and verify the other delegates. They should specify things like, do you know their Skype account? Have you had an audio call with them? Have you had a video call with them? Do you know what their picture looks like? Having a review delegate would be huge for other people, and delegates should all review each other. So I would contend that we should ask all delegates to talk to all other delegates and provide identification information about each other. Basically cross-verify your identity, cross-verify your Skype info. And it could be one of those things where a delegate doesn't have to publicly reveal the real-world identity as long as they reveal the identity to one or two of the reviewer delegates. So there's probably some options there, and I would really encourage the delegates to take it upon themselves to police each other and to demand transparency from each other. And anyone who's seeking a position as a delegate could probably start by just trying to get in contact with them and record, these are unique delegates, and log all kinds of information about where are their servers, what country are they in, what kind of policies they have for price feeds. I think BitShares blocks should probably have a delegate page, kind of like Facebook, where the delegate can log in there using our login profile, and then once they've logged in, they can upload their entire profile information to the page, and then people can just view their profile on BitShares blocks.
Do you think that we should probably have something in the client to make this review process by a shareholder easier to access, rather than having to open up a bunch of different tools to access the information?
I think BitShares blocks should be the center of most of this type of information.
Anybody else have any comments about that? DeLulo, do you have any comments about whether that would be adequate, if it was embellished to have the breadth of information that we've been talking about here?
Sorry, can you repeat it? There was a phone call coming in, and
BitShares blocks should provide publicly verifiable signed statements from all the delegates about their information. So you can go one place, click on the delegate name, jump directly to a page on BitShares blocks, kind of like a Facebook page, where you have their image, you've got their location on a map, you've got all the stats on their computer and their hardware, their any other transparency measures, everyone who endorses them, so delegates can endorse each other. I think those type of things would be very useful, so you can just look at a glance at the profile page on BitShares blocks.
That sounds good to me. It seems to address most of my concerns. And as far as delegates that want to remain anonymous, I don't think there's really much of a role for anonymous delegates in a DPoS system myself. Now, others may dispute that, but if they're anonymous, then you wouldn't have a position on BitShares blocks info like Bytemaster was just describing, and there you would have to rely upon whatever information they provide, and whatever metrics you want to use to validate that information is out of band, so to speak.
Exactly.
The automatic gateway you talk about, does it have a escrow function?
It would be a trusted gateway. It's basically issuing IOUs, so there's no escrow function with it. It is the escrow agent. I'll clarify that. You send it Bitcoin, it sends you a user-issued asset, IOU Bitcoin. You send it the IOU Bitcoin back, it sends you real Bitcoin back.
And this is all happening on the back end, essentially, so the front end user is not going to see any of that.
By IOU Bitcoin, do you mean BitBTC?
No, BitBTC is the blockchain IOU of Bitcoin.
So why not use that?
There is a spread between BitBTC and real BTC, which wouldn't allow one-to-one conversion. You can think of exchanges as having two roles. One role is escrow agent. They take funds from customers and issue them IOUs. So your balance at the exchange is an IOU. And the second role is order book matching. We are given the ability to allow Gateway to perform just the one role, IOU matching. That can be done without a website or user logins or anything, just an automated tool that will receive funds on one blockchain to send funds on the other. And then the order book matching can happen all on BitShares. So BitShares can become a cryptocurrency exchange with many different gateways hosting the trusted funds. So you can pick your IOU and you can trade an IOU from one agent for an IOU to the other. You can trade an IOU BTC for a Bit BTC, and then that will help maintain the peg, provide liquidity.
So essentially, it decentralizes and kind of spreads the risk over multiple exchanges, because if one exchange goes down and you're holding BTC in the BitShares exchange, decentralized exchange, if one exchange goes down, it doesn't keep you from being able to withdraw BTC from another exchange.
Right, you can look at it this way. You have no withdrawal limits. It gives you the possibility to have an anonymous gateway that can provide transactions, trusted transactions for Bitcoin to IOU Bitcoin. They could, of course, run away with the Bitcoin at any point in time, but they would probably be free from any and all regulation because you wouldn't know where they are. You'd see their addresses in the blockchain, but where is their server? It could be hosted behind a firewall NAT somewhere. It'd be very difficult to pinpoint. And that is a huge benefit if they prove reliable. And if they're earning money on that service by charging a very small fee, then they have more to gain by charging the fee and increasing the trust than they do by running off with the funds. It's also possible that they can put money in escrow with someone else in the event that they do run off with funds. They have something to lose.
Hypothetically, this could be connected up to centralized stock market exchanges as well, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a crypto exchange.
Ideally, it'd be nice to have Bitstamp issue Bitstamp USD on our blockchain. And then you can trade Bitstamp USD versus everything in our blockchain. All they have to do is treat us like Ripple. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we can provide the same regulatory compliance that Ripple allows them to have.
Would there be a potential, like a functionality where you could say I have an exchange account through any of the, like E-Trade or something like that? Would E-Trade be able to do the same thing with stocks and other investment vehicles?
Anyone who wants to do this can do it that way, yes.
Does the gateway need to install multiple wallets to, be a gateway? Wallets for Bitcoin, that stuff?
Yes, to be a gateway provider, you need to have both wallets on and a process running that maps payments in one to payments in the other.
This is kind of along the same lines of what we're talking about, and it was a question that was asked earlier, so since we have a minute here, I'd like to ask it. How long would it take to make nxtblocks.info, like a beta straight transaction sending of BitShares or BitUSD client, meaning we just have a few markets and allow people to trade on it straight, like directly, I guess. And I'll go ahead and I'll paste this in. It's from Eagle Eye.
I have no idea. We have a manpower shortage on web development skills.
Have you considered any ways that the community might be able to reach out and use essentially like maybe grab a delegate? A delegate might be able to go out and reach out and find somebody who's capable of building these things and bring them onto the forums. And
I'm fairly sure that this is how it's going to go down. If you know someone who is able to do these type of things, you find them, you hire them, you get a quote from them, they do it, then you run a campaign for continuing to fund their development. I think asking for money up front before you deliver anything is not a good way to run a delegate campaign. Take BitShare's blocks. He's been working on that for months. He's earned a lot of trust, and he's more or less guaranteed a delegate position as a result. Delegate position, to maintain this long term, will pay very nicely, and you're building up trust. So if you want a high-paying position in our community, you have to invest in it first. You have to put the money up to build the trust, to prove that you're capable, and then you'll get the spot. Having this all centralized around me trying to evaluate someone's skills prior to seeing what they've done to commit to pay them, you can end up in the situation of picking someone to do it, and then someone else doesn't get to do it. I think we should have competition. There should be more than one person trying to get the job. And if someone knows a shortcut, like copying nextblocks.info and integrating it with our JavaScript code and making it all work very quickly, then that would be great. They've demonstrated lots of capability, and they'll probably get my vote. Anyone who's delivering stuff gets my vote. Those just promising to deliver it, I'm a lot more hesitant on, because I've been burned too many times by people who claim to have skills, seem to have skills, but then never deliver. If you know someone who's capable, you see something that needs to get done, do it, start providing the value, and then you get compensated for it. To become a paid delegate, you've got to front 2 weeks worth of pay anyway. So you can look at it as to become a highly paid delegate, you've got to front 2 weeks worth of pay as well as 2+ weeks worth of work for the cause. If you do both of those things, you can start demonstrating some real value. You'll get a lot more votes than just saying, hey, I've fronted my pay, elect me, then I'll start doing work after I've made my money back. That's not the attitude we need from delegates.
And as a supporting point, just to let anybody know, if they are wanting to run a delegate or they have accomplished something that they believe would be considered very valuable by the community, feel free to contact me and we can set something up so the community can ask you questions and we can essentially get you approved by the community. And if the community approves you in a setting like this, I'll do my best to put in a delegate voting, a quick link in the Mumble server for anybody who does produce something valuable for the community. Matt 608 is asking about the referral program.
Right now we are mostly focused on getting the protocol to 1.0 status, and then we're going to switch to referral programs. And we don't want to refer people to something that's changing on a week-by-week basis.
When about do you see the 1.0 coming?
I would really like to be 1.0 by the end of the year.
Do you see this as feasible, or is this a kind of a pie-in-the-sky kind of hope?
Probably very optimistic. My goal for 1.0 is to get to something I consider stable enough that I'd be willing to add no new features at a protocol level for 6 months. We can be working on the features on the dev shares chain, but I don't want to add it to the main chain for 6 months. So identifying what those core features are and getting to the point where we're satisfied with them for that duration of time. The reason we do that is because we don't want to have hard forks and forced upgrades so often, because that's just bad user experience. I think people can probably handle an upgrade every 6 months initially, and then every year once we're more mature.
I'll use this as just a quick reminder. It is 12:07, so we're running at a little bit past the hour marker. Bytemaster, can you give us a little bit of an idea how much more time you'd like to spend here?
I'd like to mention that we are working on a interim marketing campaign prior to version 1.0. The goal here is that we need to attract early adopters. Early adopters need different things than the massive on-ramp marketing campaign that we have been building up. So we're going to try to win people over on philosophy, return to our roots, and return to using voting. There's just two different user groups I want to go after on a ideological, philosophical basis. One is the crypto anarchists, and the other is those who want transparent democracy. Those two groups are at odds with each other, but nevertheless, I think we can bring them both into our camp with a reasonable marketing strategy. So to that end, you might have seen my post about imagine a world where there is no violence, there are no countries, no contracts, and we're really going to try to explore those ideas in a video blog fashion. We're going to drive people to those video blogs, and we're going to discuss how BitShares helps achieve that vision. So we're going to try to drive people to BitShares as a solution to those problems, and that will expose people that will get involved earlier because, hey, I want to make a difference. I want to see this vision become a reality, so I'm going to buy some and start using it, which is different from the people who say, I want to make some money, I'm going to buy some BitUSD so I can earn some interest. Two different mindsets there. I don't know how many of you remember our original website a year ago. It was very much about freedom, transparency, free space, all kinds of stuff like that. It attracted a large initial user base. I'd really like to focus on what the vision of Bitcoin is, just like my keynote talk I made in Vegas. Talk about what it actually means and how we're trying to achieve it, and less so about the end solution for the customer. BitUSD isn't where it needs to be yet. Why? There's just not enough liquidity. So we need to bootstrap the liquidity, bootstrap the user base, and the people that are going to participate in the bootstrapping are going to be the ones who are on board for the change the world mindset.
Agreed. I'm going to ask this. I don't know that it's really necessary to ask this right now, but I feel that's not my decision, and that this will be the last question that has been asked by the community. I would like to know if Bytemaster thinks that Rune's proposal to take over the Bitcoin blockchain is feasible, and if so, if we don't do it, will someone else?
I don't think it's feasible.
Well, that answers it. I'll go ahead and I'll say thank you from everybody here in the community, Bytemaster, for being open and coming on here and answering questions for everybody. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. And if no one else has anything to say, I think we can safely end this recording for the week, and I'll let everybody know that we'll be starting to hold a few more Hangouts probably over the course of the coming months. So keep an eye out.